We actually raised our children to think for themselves, but there was a problem with that. They then began to
think for themselves.
If you didn't want that outcome.
And we would have great debates around the family table, and we can all have different views, but we're able to listen to each other's different views.
Family Life Australia presents Marriage and Family Life, a program of practical advice and encouraging stories to bring you hope and to enrich your marriage and family life.
Today on Marriage and Family Life, we're going to be talking about the gate and the garden fence. And what does that have to do with parenting? Stay tuned and you'll find out. And our guests today are Dr. Ian and Dr. Helene Richardson. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks,
Thank
Eric.
you.
Okay, you're both teachers, counselors, and most importantly, parents of 5 children. You've learned this in books, but also in reality.
That's right. The reality came first, really.
And I think that was the hardest one.
The school of life, yes. Well, we're going to find out about the gate and the garden fence, but I will give a little hint. It's talking about discernment. Now, when we had you on last time, we talked about when your child turns 20 years old, what do we want that child to be like? What characteristics do we want them to have? And one major one that I think all parents would agree, we want them to be able to have good discernment and be able to make judgments about who they let in their life, who they don't let in, and just judgment about life.
Yes.
And so how do we get to that end? Please tell me. Please.
How far along the track are you?
I have 2 teenagers right now.
Actually, it begins right at the beginning. So the moment a child is born, we're actually in the process of equipping them and training them to stand on their own feet and to leave home. Mm-hmm. So we're actually training them to leave home right from the beginning.
Yeah, the first time you teach them to tie their shoes, you're training them to leave home.
Oh, boy.
When they first learn to use a spoon, they're training to leave home.
But it's a scary process the first time they go to the toilet without telling you they're going.
we don't even have to explain that. So basically, let's kind of walk through the stages. So it starts off just by telling your children what is important and what we value in this family.
And it's about modelling it more than anything else. So the whole concept of the values, the nurture, the responsive demandingness that we'd spoken about in the previous interview that we did with you, that right from the very beginning, from the moment a baby is born, the responsiveness is so crucial from both parents. The connection, the attachment between the child and the parenting, caring and nurturing and so forth there, but also in the modelling of values and principles of life, that we live what we teach to them. In those very early stages, they're seeing it outworked in our life, and they're then able to learn from us and model and use us as a model for their own life. And then, of course, as they get a little older, we're able to explain the reasons why we do certain things.
One example I can think of, if you want your child to be empathic when they get older, they learn empathy from you. So if they're sad, you pick up on the fact that they're sad and you say, I can see you're sad. Is that what's happening? And they can then acknowledge that they're sad, allowed to be sad, let you soothe them. And then you can let them know too, oh, Mummy's a bit sad today. And so they'll usually, if this has been modelled to them, they will then come and hug you and return to you what you've given to them. So as little children, this is the kind of way you do it. If they are scared of getting some kind of retribution if they've done something wrong, for an authoritarian parent, they may come in very hard on a child, and then the child may resort to lying to get out of punishment. But if you love a child when they do something wrong, you can teach them the right way, let them know that it's okay for them to let you know if they've done something wrong, that the punishment or the consequence will fit what they've done, and then they can see it's fair. So you're modelling this, you don't need to lie because you're accepted anyway.
Okay, and so it's going to change depending on what
age
yes. And what stage. So generally speaking, you're training at one point, and then you kind of move into, coaching?
Yeah, and it's about releasing the child as they get older. The young child needs very tighter controls, if you like, if we can use that word. But as a child gets into their adolescent years, we as parents have got to be able to release them more and more so that by the time they reach their 18 to 20-year-old, they can totally stand on their own feet. Unfortunately, what so often happens is the opposite, that the parents release the little children because they think, oh, isn't that cute, instead of teaching them the values and the boundaries, etc., when they're little. And then when they become teenagers, the teenagers start to go off in all sorts of directions that parents don't like, and then they start to clamp down on them and try and prevent them from doing things. And, of course, that creates rebellion within the teenagers. And so it's so often the wrong way round. We've got to begin by having the tighter boundaries and modelling with them. And so as we get into the adolescent years, we're able to let go of the child more and more because they have already embraced the values and they've already embraced the way they can make decisions on the basis of values. And we can begin to release them more and talk with them more and, as you say, coach them rather than control them through those adolescent years. And then as they come into their adult years, we're able to sit with them more as friends than as authority figures.
Okay, so that's a very important point, that they got to buy into the values.
Yes.
Because if they just think, well, I don't value treating people nice, just as an example, then they're not going to make good decisions.
No, that's right. As Ian was talking, I was thinking about, you said about the garden fence, and I was thinking about this garden fence.
Yes, let's tell our listeners, what is this gate in the garden fence? What's that about?
The garden fence is, if you can think of it as your own person, your own personal space, what you value, who you are, and it's a space where you let other people in and a space where you can actually keep people out if you don't want to. And I give my counselees a picture with a picket fence around them. There's a lady in there with her daisies or tulips or whatever, watering them. There's a gate and it has a latch on the inside of the gate. You can open it and let people in. You can talk over the fence to other people, but it is your space and people should not be allowed to trample on your daisies in there. So we as parents, when the children are young, are kind of like that fence for the children. We create the boundaries. We keep them safe. We don't let others just pick them up and take them away. We don't allow their space to be invaded. Yes.
But gradually, as you're heading toward 18, 20 years old,
yes, they have to maintain their own garden fence.
And hopefully, if they have healthy values, they're going to be making those decisions on their own.
Yes.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
Yes. Yeah. And a lot of people who come for counselling do not have good garden fences.
What does that mean?
It means that they've let people come in on their lives. Take the battered wife, for instance. The husband's been allowed to step into her personal space and to actually physically beat her up. Others can't say no to people when they really need to, and they get run off their feet because they're saying yes to everyone because they don't want to be disliked. They think if I don't do whatever other people want me to do, then they won't like me.
So that's one scenario that's bad. Don't let that happen to you. You just let everybody come in, trample over your fence and just come in your gate.
Yes.
And you just don't have any boundaries.
That's right. And you don't know who you are yourself, really, because everyone else is in your personal space.
Okay, what's the other extreme then?
A wall.
Yeah, building walls around ourselves so that nobody can get in. And what we often find happen when a child grows up in a home, the parents are there to teach the child about their garden fence, the boundaries of their life, the values, etc. But it's so often in a dysfunctional home, the parents tread all over the children. So the children are trying to grow their little daisies of life, make their life look pretty, and the parents come in and just trample them all down. And so the children have no boundaries in their life whatsoever because the parents have just walked all over them. And so as a result of that, other people walk all over them as well. And so life doesn't work well, so they build big brick walls around themselves.
And that can look like depression.
Yeah.
Isolation.
Yes. Yeah.
Withdrawing.
The no fence is extremely vulnerable. The brick walls is isolated. Nobody can get in and they don't get out. The sun doesn't get in, so the flowers don't grow. And then they say, this isn't working for me, I've got to get rid of these walls, but they've got nothing to replace the walls with, and so they're back into that place of vulnerability.
And
So-
then maybe a wolf in sheep's clothing
Yes.
kind of says, oh, I'll treat you nice
Exactly.
and all this.
Yes.
And they're like, oh, I'll let that person in my gate.
Yeah,
Yes.
they do.
And then they turn
do.
out to be an abuser.
Yes,
That's right.
Exactly.
That's
Exactly.
right. So we take time with clients to actually teach them the aspects of this garden fence and what the garden fence is made up of, what the gate is and what the lock is, and how we utilise them. To make decisions for ourselves, but also especially how to build relationship with others.
And one big thing for most people to learn is no.
Just say no.
Just say no.
And I think another thing is that it's so important that they learn how to do that themselves.
Yes.
Because if they
Yes.
were in an authoritarian home
Yes.
where what gets in the gate is all decided for them, then when all of a sudden they turn 18 or whatever and they're out on their own,
They haven't built their
no
own
experience
fence. That's
at
right.
discernment.
Mm-hmm.
And do you see that?
Yes.
See
Yes.
a lot of that, and that's
Yes.
scary.
And what do you do?
We have to then help them to establish their own values.
Find
And
out who they are themselves.
Yes.
Usually they're so lost inside there, they
Yeah.
don't know who they are.
And that then comes back to dealing with some of the issues between them and their parents. And that's often hard for them, particularly somebody who's grown up in a Christian home, but it's been an authoritarian home. Now there's the conflict in here because they're seeming as though they've got to rebel against their parents and God in order to establish their own life, and it's not an easy journey.
Okay, we're talking about the gate and the garden fence, teaching your children how to discern what gets in and what should be left out. We're talking to Dr. Ian and Dr. Helene Richardson, and we'll have more parenting tips as Marriage and Family Life continues.
You're listening to Marriage and Family Life, presented by FamilyLifeAustralia.com. If you have any questions or comments, you can email us info@FamilyLifeAustralia.com or use our toll-free number 1800 358 6329.
And welcome back to Marriage and Family Life, where we're talking about the gate and the garden fence. Well, it's all about teaching our children discernment, and to help us to discern these things, we have Dr. Ian and Dr. Helene Richardson, our guests today. Both have backgrounds in counseling. And before the break, we were talking about this gate and the garden fence. It's kind of this metaphor that we're sharing with listeners that we need to have our children, by the time they get to 18 to 20, they need to learn who they let into their gate. Can you tell us a little bit more about what makes up this gate?
Yeah. Okay. First thing, if we think of a fence, there's the posts and there's the rails on the fence. And so I like to think in terms of three things that make up our garden fence. First is the values that we carry in life. Second is our purpose for existence, our direction in life. And the third thing is a concept I call mutuality. Mutuality is the balance of giving and receiving. In a dysfunctional relationship, you find values are different. You find they're heading in different directions, and you often find that there is no sense of mutuality, that one partner is giving and the other is always taking. Within families, sometimes it's like that parents might feel as though they're always giving and never receiving any love back from their children, or children might feel as though they're always having to keep the peace in the home and so forth, but there's no sense of mutuality. So we have values, we have purpose, we need mutuality. Then the gate is our discernment, what our gut sense is telling us about things, what we perceive here. And the final thing is the lock on the gate. And this is really the most important one of all, which is the ability to say no without feeling guilty. If somebody can't say no without feeling guilty, then their little daisies are going to get trodden on by everybody.
Now, I recently heard that a characteristic of a healthy family is you can say no, and you can disagree without being disagreeable and having problems. So in healthy families and relationships, people can have opposing views on things and say, no, I disagree with that.
Yeah.
And it's okay.
We actually raised our children to think for themselves, but there was a problem with that. They then began to
Think for themselves.
think for themselves.
If you didn't want that outcome.
And we would have great debates around the family table, and it's great for us now at this era of our life with all of our children well grown up and left home. But when we all gather around home, the debate that goes